Are unions obsolete? The trend is for people to assume unions are no longer needed. The major reforms are in place and the cost of union membership no longer provides the benefits it once did. There is the belief also that unions make it difficult for companies to compete. The managers of unionized plants are no longer able to unilaterally alter working conditions. This is viewed as a liability, at least in the eyes of management. Why would the worker want to restrict the ability of an employer to compete, is the question. Of course, it is not that the worker wants to hinder the competitiveness of the workplace, it is that he does not wish to bear the full responsibility for a plant's competitiveness, when he is prevented from participating in modifying the conditions of work. Many managers view themselves as ship's captain. Managers navigate commercial enterprises through the stormy waters of international competition. Managing a company is easier without having to worry about the reactions of an organized workforce, but then everything is easier when one has totalitarian powers. But what is not considered is if we could not get rid of unions if we also abandoned the outdated idea of private ownership. Managers would like to simplify the task of management by eliminating the need to consider any other interests but their own, but even without unions, this is too one-sided to be acceptable. Many labor leaders wonder why unions have declined in popularity. If unions are a good thing, then every worker should be in a union, right? Since not every worker is in a union, then that must mean unions are not a good idea. A Walmart in Windsor became unionized, but the rest of the chain failed to follow suit. Why is that? Asking why one store unionized and others did not is akin to asking why the world did not engage in revolution after the French revolts of 1789. That the French revolted is neither evidence that revolutions are good for all peoples nor proof that have no value because everyone did not follow the French lead. Revolution makes sense for those who have no other choice. It is likely a bad choice for those who have an alternative, such as access to the ballot. Likewise, unionism is only good for those who find working without a union is impossible. Unions are, for the most part, a last recourse. Workers unionize when all other options have failed. Let's face it, people are by nature complacent. Yet, if things get bad enough, people will go to the trouble of forming a union. If it gets intolerable, they will even revolt. It is not surprising then that unions are not everywhere. It is not bad enough, everywhere. Organizers lack the power to get people off there but and into a union hall. Only an oppressive workplace has the power to unionize the workplace. Workers organize only when all else fails. For workers there is a cost to organizing and a cost of being complacent. If system is careful about the rate at which it extracts wealth from labor, labor is likely to keep working without disruption. But if the rate of extortion become oppressive, the worker is likely to become more restive and even violent. Capital makes the point of why bother to make a product if the price of the product does not cover the costs of its manufacture? If a company hired people at starvation wages, it could sell its products more cheaply. If the product was cheaper, the company could compete more effectively. The company would need to replace any worker that died of starvation. This would not directly impact their bottom line, but it would still be a cost of doing business. But the company has made the mistake of assuming its life is more important than the life of its workers. Is the profit they earn worth the cost? What if a more comprehensive system of accounts were used? Is a company which cannot afford to give its workers a living wage recovering the costs of manufacture, or externalizing them on a subject population? A company which processed materials without concern for worker safety would compete successfully against a company that put safety procedures in place. But if the lack of safety permitted it to sell produce well below market price, where would they find the money to take care of all of the people who they killed or injured, or would they just externalize these costs onto society and future generations? Business without rules and unions is a fantasy. It is a dream to do what we want without consideration for others. But that will never happen, at least in a civilized nation. Rules are always problematical for they make things difficult. They add costs to production, but we need to ensure companies do the right thing. It is too easy to do otherwise. Those who own and run a business often believe the business exists solely to make a profit. They compound this error by assuming that this profit belongs solely to them. This is a comforting thought if you own a business. But it is foolish to believe on the basis of wishful thinking. There is nothing in nature that would lead anyone to this conclusion. It's not a natural assumption to make, so where does the idea of ownership come from? A business is a social concern. It is owned under license. It operates under the guidance and protection of the state. The business owner does not buy the air or the soil because no one exists to sell it to them. The state simply appropriates the land and licenses its use to certain of its subjects. We, the people, did not create Canada to benefit business owners. If you wish to do business, one does it according to the terms set out by the body politic. Why should a company dictate working conditions, just so they are able to meet or exceed their expectations? The country does not owe them anything. What if they become more competitive, or less? To what end do they operate? There is more at stake here than the interests of an owner. We do not permit owners to whip tardy employees. Does this make his business less competitive? Does it matter? Does the company sell widgets because it believes it can outperform every other company selling widgets, or because the world needs widgets? Do people enter the field of business simply to make money? Unions protect the rights of the workers, not to harm the business, but to ensure it fulfills the conditions under which it implicitly operates. It is harder to organize production when you cannot ruthlessly goad people into increasing the speed at which they work. No one denies this. It is much harder to close down production lines when you have to consider seniority and the possible transfer of workers to other jobs. But does that make these concerns wrong? Capitalism tries to make things simple for the business person, but society has other concerns than that a business makes money. Competitiveness is not just about being able to make cheap products. Competitiveness is all about making the best nation and lifestyle from the resources which one has. If the business owner is in Canada, it is not by chance. He could be in any one of 100 different places. We chose Canada, not because it makes money, though it does. Canada does more, with what it has, for the people, than other places. Canada is not the product of a penny pinching, bottom line is king, thought. Canada is not capitalist, nor communist. We need to look at more than the cost of unions. You have to look at more than the cost of policing the state. We have to consider the cost of unfettered capitalism and at all of the alternatives, such as the cost of anarchy. In the final analysis, all businesses are part of Canada. There is always a price to pay for the products we produce. If we want a car with a sunroof, we have to pay extra. If we want a country, we have to pay that cost, also. There are some things which cannot be bought but for which we must still work. In these instances, we need to make a choice about if we will work for money or merit. The point is, a company is not in a position to tell us what has merit nor what kind of behavior ought to be rewarded. They lack the perspective. Creating a culture requires work. We have to choose what has the most value to us. Making a company into an operation which is run for the benefit all, while still remaining profitable, requires work. For most capitalists, it is more work than it is worth. They want to capture all of the wealth they create, for their own benefit. This does not bring into question the value of unions, it brings into question the validity of the capitalist system. If people cannot afford to ensure a private business has social merit, we may need an alternative business model. Our commitment to a quality of life unattainable elsewhere means we cannot afford to allow businesses to be run as they are run in these places. Canada may not be able to allow business leaders to sit down with their vice presidents and make decisions that impact the lives of dedicated workers who have tied their lives to the company. Perhaps owners might need to go to union stewards and negotiate and justify the company's actions. But it makes for a better workplace, and it will make for a better Canada. But the reality is, most companies are not up to the task. Dealing with unions will hurt them financially. Unions can and do create conditions in which companies fail. But management can also create those same conditions. Unions can permit the concerns of the workforce to be met at a reasonable cost. Much of the cost of creating a consensus and establishing bargaining priorities is absorbed by the union. Without unions, management is left to guess what it is their employees need, or they are left to address concerns voiced by individuals who have an axe to grind. There is some truth to the contention that the betterment of working conditions and increases in pay rates do not result in a sustained increase in productivity. But is it not also true that the effort expended by people in the service of the company is often taken for granted? But much of the problems we encounter in a workplace is the result of employers who view their employees as a cost, to be kept as low as possible.